Meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 20 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Today, the meeting is taking place again in the hybrid format. I've been made aware that there may be a vote today regarding a sub-amendment to the budget. I'm told that bells could start to ring at 5:15 for a period of 30 minutes, and that the vote would be held at approximately 5:45 today. When the bells start ringing, we'll have 15 minutes left to the meeting, theoretically. I will be interrupting the proceedings at that time to seek unanimous consent to continue to sit during the bells until our normal end time of 5:30. This should give us plenty of time to get prepared for the vote. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that was coming. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on October 27th, 2020, the committee is resuming its study on supports and services to veterans, caregivers, and families. Welcome to all the witnesses who have taken the time to join us today. I will introduce all of you, and then we'll get right into the opening remarks. Appearing as individual, we have Mr. Glenn Hines, and as well as Dr. Greg Passy from the Association de Royale 22nd Regiment, Richard Gauthier from the Pearly and Redo Veterans Health Center. We have Mary Boutiette, Chief Operating Officer. And coming back to us again, thank you for taking the time to join us again as a result of the technical challenges. We have from Caregiving Matters, Mary Bart, the chair. So again, thank you to all the witnesses. You'll each have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. And we'll start off with Mr. Hines. The next 5 minutes are all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of this committee and fellow panel members this afternoon, good afternoon. And I'd like to thank you for the invitation to appear today. Before I get into the substance of deliberations, just a brief background of myself. I'm a veteran of 41 years service of the Canadian Armed Forces in the regular and the reserve forces, having served in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. When I retired in 2012, I remained in Brussels, where I was a civilian director of NATO's intelligence sharing enterprise. So none of this has anything to do with veteran mental health care. However, since that time, I've been involved with supporting and advocating on behalf of veterans and their families in a variety of capacities, with my emphasis being on veteran and family mental wellness. And I understand that your focus of the committee right now in this session is on the supports and services to veterans, caregivers, and families, and that today you wish to focus on 3 elements: the impact of the Caregiver Recognition Allowance since its introduction, the relevance and possible means of enabling family members to get VAC services on their own behalf, and to reflect more generally on the support offered by VAC to family members, particularly when it comes to veteran health that requires ongoing care. Starting with the caregiver recognition benefit, and I just want to correct a statement that was made in my invitation, which referred to something called the Caregiver Recognition Allowance. It's actually the caregiver recognition benefit, and this nuance is important. It's not an allowance per se, but it's $1,000 per month to benefit, to recognize and not compensate, but to recognize the contribution of a family caregiver to the care and recovery of our most severely disabled veterans based on their disability, not based on necessarily the impact on the family. It does not replace income or earnings lost by these family caregivers. It merely recognizes that they have a role to play in caring for the veteran. As I indicated previously in my advocacy role, my emphasis is on veteran mental health. So I've been particularly interested in the caregiver recognition benefit as it applies to veterans with a diagnosed mental health condition. And since raising this issue of equitability, that is, the equitability between a veteran with a mental health condition and a veteran with a physical disability, I've focused on some data from VAC, and it indicates that approximately 70% of the applicants for the caregiver recognition benefit are in receipt of disability benefits for a mental health condition, and that 81% of those eligible for the caregiver recognition actually have an approved disability entitlement for mental health condition. So in fact, it does appear that the award of the caregiver recognition benefit is equitable for veterans struggling with mental health conditions as it is for those with physical disabilities. When we talk about enabling families to obtain VAC services on their own behalf, I think we could take a lesson from our allies in Australia. In Canada, there are very little supports and services provided to family members, and there are no supports and services provided to family members on their own right from VAC. Family members will only get support from VAC if it is directly related to the veteran's condition and recovery. And this means that the family's need for support must be directly related to the member's condition and their treatment. Thus, if a veteran himself or herself does not have an awarded condition, a family member who may be suffering as a result of the member's service is not able to access VAC support for themselves. And this is especially important when we're dealing with family mental health. The veteran may choose not to apply for a disability award or to seek help for whatever their own personal reason is, but that doesn't mean that his or her dependents aren't adversely impacted by the veteran's service or that they don't need help. Consider for a moment the teenager who's moved with their parents every few years while growing up. A parent's deployed every few years. School has been disrupted. The teen starts struggling with their own mental health. They don't have access to mental health care because they're always moving, and they go on a rather lengthy provincial waiting list to get care. They don't have access to VAC services because their veteran parent doesn't have an awarded condition. So they suffer without help, even though their condition may well be attributed to their veteran's service. We used to say that members joined the Canadian Armed Forces, but their families were drafted. I chose to join. My wife and my kids didn't choose to join, but they have been subject to all of the career implications and the lifestyle implications as a result of my service. And unfortunately, in retirement or after release, this continues where the dependents are struggling sometimes with conditions that their veteran parent has, but they don't have access to services and support. The care and support needed are often in the area of mental health, and it's a discipline that is stigmatized, making access even more difficult for spouses and children. Veterans and their families face a unique experience during the military career and transitioning to service life, and it is very difficult for them to get the care that they need while they're on lengthy provincial waiting lists, especially for mental health conditions. Military life can involve significant challenges, not the least is exposure to life and death situations. And for many veterans and military service, operational deployments can lead to a strong sense of identity and belonging. For clinicians working with veterans, demonstrating an understanding of the military experience enhances the therapeutic alliance so that they can get effective treatment.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Hines. Yes. We're well past time. I'm just wondering if you could just conclude your statements.
I will.
Thank you.
I certainly will. So the Australian situation is one that we would welcome, where veteran family members can get access to care through the Veterans Affairs on their own right without having to rely on the provincial system that often has a very long, lengthy waiting time and doesn't have clinicians who are trained in the veteran lifestyle. My apologies for going over.
That's okay, Mr. Hines. That's my job. I am the official chief interrupter of this meeting, so I apologize to you and to everyone if I do need to cut you off. But up next, we have Dr. Passy for 5 minutes, please. Do we have Dr. Passy? Did we lose him? I don't see him on the screen, Mr. Clerk. Do you know if he's still with us?
He just dropped off.
Okay, so thanks, Kathy. I didn't see him drop off, so we'll maybe reach out to him, Mr. Clerk, via the technical staff to see if we can get him back. In the meantime, we will stay calm and carry on. And up next is Mr. Gauthier for 5 minutes.
Hello. I'd like to thank you for the invitation to come and discuss the things that are important to you for veterans and caregivers throughout Canada. I am Richard Gauthier. I served 16 years in the Royal 22nd Regiment. I founded a group of veterans in 2019. Even with the pandemic, I have 1,200 members on my Facebook page, and I have 400 members who are very active. These people are 88% of them are people who served in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, in Rwanda, in Haiti, in Germany during the Cold War. So my data comes directly from the source. The reason why I founded such a group was to bring people out of isolation and out of their situations of depression, because often procedures are much too lengthy and it brings on serious problems. A soldier is a person who has served, who has given of themselves. So I created a annual calendar. For example, on February 21st, 2020, I served 350 hot meals. I gave warm clothes to the homeless in Montreal. And my group, out of those 1,200 people, 400 of them very active and participated in this event, which was very successful, and we're going to repeat it every year. My group is not like a motorcycle gang. It's a group that is registered as a nonprofit organization. And if you want to find out more about it, go to veterans with an S, r.com, and you'll see the description of my group. I carried out a survey with this group about the subject we're dealing with today, so caregivers. I'll tell you about the points that were mentioned, and then I will mention my suggestions on this topic. The criteria for eligibility are too limited. The treatments are much too long. The procedures are much too long. It doesn't make any sense. And on the French side, we did not have enough staff, so maybe that needs to be readjusted. So it's not normal that it would take 36 months and 48 months for this procedures. The treatments are much too long, and I'll give you my recommendations. The amount of the allowances are not high enough. Give a direct link for caregivers. There's a lack of Francophone staff, and I don't know how it's working on the English side, how long it takes. I won't speak for them. Here are my recommendations related to what I've just mentioned. I suggest creating a committee that will be dealing only with the caregivers, so we can go directly to the source. So the person signs up with their officer in their district, and then they send that directly to that committee. That committee should have a doctor, GP, a psychological, an administrative person, and a social worker. So they'll be able to understand the situation quickly and be able to give an answer within 30 days, and often accepting the person's request. And it would be good that we would document caregivers, and the veterans send a letter that explains things and a brochure with all the rights that they will have to become a caregiver. Create a website that would have videos with healthcare professionals who would give advice to help the caregivers fulfill their role as well as possible. Have a 1-800 link that could be a fallback number for the caregivers, because you can have serious psychological problems with veterans, and sometimes the caregivers can have trouble and would need a kind of safety net, and also to encourage them and to be able to consult psychologists. This $1,000 a month amount is insufficient. It's an incredible workload to be a caregiver. I suggest that it goes to $1,500 non-taxable. I'll give you an example. I have a member in my group whose spouse decided to work 3 days a week rather than 2. Her annual salary was $84,000. Now it's $51,000. So that person, to help a veteran who served our country, has lost $33,000. So the $1,000 is insufficient. Even if you say it's not to compensate that person, but it is that the veterans that are on the caregiver program should have should be on a priority list to get dogs or animals help them out to take them out of boredom. Boredom is something. It's very much a problem. These selection criteria should be broader. Many veterans, you have to remember that they're now bachelors, because often the natural helper is the spouse, but many of them are now bachelors because their spouse has left them and their children have left them because it's too hard to live with that situation. I think that the people who are closest to a veteran are their family. So we could include their father, their mother. So a young 30-year-old, well, their parents in the 50s or 60s can be natural caregivers. An uncle, an aunt too, a close friend should also be eligible for that program. I looked at the eligibility criteria. Yes?
Again, we're over time. If you could wrap up your opening statement, please.
OK. J'ai presque terminé. On parle beaucoup de l'hygiène, la nourriture.
I'm almost finished. We talk about hygiene, about food, but we often forget PTSD, as was said earlier. So that must be taken into account. And I'd like to thank all those who have served their country. Thank you very much. It's all I had to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gauthier. We do have Dr. Passy back. Do we need to do a sound check, Mr. Clerk? Okay, we're apparently sound check is good. So, Mr. Passy, the next 5 minutes are yours, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to address the committee. My background is I'm a veteran. I served 22 years in the Canadian military as a doctor and later as a psychiatrist. I'm an expert internationally and nationally in post-traumatic stress disorder. I currently have about 133 veterans on my caseload. In Vancouver, I've assessed and treated hundreds of veterans as well as serving members in Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia. And as such, I've had a lot of experience dealing with the VAC offices and have a long clinical and corporate history with them. I've served on 2 separate Veterans Affairs committees that are listed in my paper that I've given to you. I'd like to say that since from the late 90s until about 2010, the PTSD claims that I put forward were typically awarded within 6 weeks. There's been a significant degradation of VAC service and an increase in denial decisions starting about 6 years ago, especially in the year prior to the 2015 election, when funds were cut to VAC. But even since that time, the time for VAC decisions and the Veterans Review and Appeal Board decisions now can take as long as 18 months. And of even greater concern to me is the increased level of denial of claims up to and including the last level of appeal at the Veterans Review and Appeal Board. In regards to the caregiver allowance, I've listed 7 different items in my talking notes. Number 1, lack of adequate VAC resources to provide timely service, decision, and support to veterans. 2, inconsistent application of the eligibility criteria, resulting in some applications being approved and others with the same level of disability being denied. Lack of flexibility when applying the eligibility criteria, with a seeming bias against mental health, diagnosis, and disability, especially in our young veterans. overly restrictive eligibility criteria, excessive time to review the application, and the appeal system is likewise slow and inconsistent. There's a lack of any VAC quality assurance program, and this was first recommended by the VAC, Canadian Armed Forces Advisory Council in 2000. To date, nothing has been done in regards to this. And there's a lack of any ability for veterans or their family members to give appropriate feedback to VAC in their interactions. I want to quickly run, I've given you two separate examples of veterans. I'm going to run through the one. This started Veteran A. In July 2018, I stated that the veteran should not be left alone at home for more than a few hours. Despite this, the caregiver's allowance was not awarded. In November, the veteran actually has significant deficits, meeting the majority of the ADLs listed in the denial letter. He has problems with his balance and falls easily. He may not be able to get up by himself. He is unable to shave himself, partly because of osteoarthritis in his fingers and because he typically will cut himself, so his wife has to shave him. He has to be reminded to shower. He can't wash his lower limbs because of restricted flexibility. He often won't eat or remember to eat even when it's pre-made. He has difficulty outside of the house on uneven ground and has fallen easily a number of times. His wife does not like to leave him alone for any significant amount of time because she does not feel he is safe on his own. He could leave the stove on and start a fire because he forgets when he's trying to cook. At that time, again, I stated he was incapable of safely staying by himself for more than a few hours, and I recommended caregiver recognition benefit. Again, it was denied. And April 23, 2019, veteran has fallen on more than one occasion, has not been able to get back up himself. This puts him at considerable risk for his physical safety, especially if it occurs outside. Again, my opinion was he was no longer safe to be left alone, and his wife likewise confirms this. Again, denied. Finally, in January of 2020, he revealed to me he had felt suicidal after VAC rejected any increase in his PTSD award and rejected the caregiver allowance. He made a serious attempt at suicide, and by pure luck, and I mean he didn't hit the tree square on, otherwise he would have died. In March, I noted that he had fallen at the end of January, fractured his left elbow, had a hairline fracture of his right ear and left eye, and he had no memory of the event. He remained quite angry at VAC because of all the denials and of various claims, and he basically remains home alone a lot. Finally, after over 2 years, this veteran was awarded the caregiver allowance despite all my letters, and only after fracturing his elbow and having 2 skull fractures in January of 2020. This is one of many denials. He's an older veteran from the 60s and 70s. And again, the other veteran, his wife, a younger veteran, has written a letter that you can read. There's ongoing problems with the entitlements and decisions within Veterans Affairs. And we need to find ways to correct this. It cannot go on like this. We're losing too many people, and we're not tracking all the suicides. And at that, I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Dr. Passy. Up next, we have Ms. Boutiette from, the next 5 minutes are all yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to make representation this afternoon. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Pearlie and Rideau Veterans Health Center, and we support over 250 older veterans, their caregivers and families, both in long-term care and in supportive living apartments. Monday evening, as I was leaving work, I had the opportunity to speak with the daughter of a veteran who was admitted to our long-term care home 2 weeks ago. The daughter had been supporting her parent, who has Alzheimer's disease, at home for several years. The daughter shared that she had failed her mother, first by letting her fall while at home, then while in hospital as she deteriorated due to lack of physical and social activity. She was crying. The daughter was struggling with her mother's transition to long-term care and the profound change this meant for her day-to-day life as a caregiver. Her caregiving role had not ceased, but was profoundly changed, aligned with her mother's transition. So her story is one, but of countless examples of families and loved ones who are caring for older veterans. And how can we ensure that these families and caregivers receive the support and services required to optimize their quality of life and also that of the veteran who they care for? Families and caregivers are essential to the physical and psychosocial health of veterans. And indeed, they've often been described as the strength behind the uniform. This is true not only when an active member transitions to civilian life due to illness or injury, but also as a veteran ages and their capacity declines. The needs of veterans and their caregivers are intrinsically linked. To support the veteran, one must support the caregiver, and to support the caregiver, one must support the veteran. In August of 2017, the Office of the Veterans Ombudsman published its report, A Continuum of Care, A Journey from Home to Long-Term Care. And the report clearly articulated the need to ensure that aging veterans and their caregivers receive appropriate support across their life course trajectory. Their recommended changes are designed to help reduce complexity and enhance benefits and services to those who need them, when and where they are needed, while ensuring that eligibility is not tied to the veteran's status or location of residence. Benefits and services should be flexible enough to move and adapt seamlessly with the veteran as the needs and care settings change. Required improvements to services and supports for veterans, their caregivers, and families can be grouped into three broad themes: close the gap, enhance outreach, and reduce complexity. Closing the gap. Veterans Affairs has a long tradition of supporting priority access to long-term care for veterans of World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. And additionally, the department aims to support veterans and their caregivers to remain in the community as long as possible through the Veterans Independence Program. This program provides annual funding to eligible veterans to help cover the cost of home care services and is an excellent support for those with limited needs who are capable of independently navigating a wide variety of service providers. Unfortunately, there's often inadequate support for veterans and their caregivers as their needs change and remaining at home is no longer an option. The burden of care falls to families. Accessing long-term care is challenging, particularly so for those who served following the Korean War. And it's not just access, it's about quality care. Veterans Affairs must shift its focus to the continuum of care, aligned with the diverse life course trajectories of veterans. Families and caregivers should have confidence and access to quality services based on need, whether that be in the community, a supportive or assisted living environment, or long-term care. This should include support for caregivers when veterans are unable to perform instrumental activities of daily living, such as household management and childcare. In terms of enhancing outreach, as veterans age, family and caregivers age with them. And navigating health and support services is challenging for the most privileged among us, but is particularly difficult for those with declining cognitive capacity and for those who aren't comfortable with technology. It's too easy for veterans and caregivers to fall through the cracks. It's essential that Veterans Affairs enhance its outreach programs and communications. This can be accomplished through systematic and planned reassessments of veterans at risk and by partnering with established veteran service organizations to ensure awareness and organization of appropriate supports. The Veterans Healthcare regulations are notoriously complex, with benefit eligibility often tied to type of service. In addition, federal supports and services are often layered upon provincial and municipal programs. Care is frequently fragmented, and negotiating and managing services on behalf of the veteran can be overwhelming and exhausting. Access to a continuum of care and support must be as seamless as possible, ideally with a single point of entry. Eligibility criteria should be clear and equitable, and that is to say based on physical and psychosocial needs rather than based on type of service. In conclusion, it's important to note that very little research has been conducted that examines the trajectories of older veterans and their families. A deeper understanding of the journey lived by older Canadian veterans, their families and caregivers would enable the development of more tailored supports and services. Thank you for the opportunity to make representation on behalf of veterans, their families, and caregivers.
Thank you very much. And up next, we have Ms. Bart. The next 5 minutes are yours. Ms. Bart, you're on, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
How's that?
There you go.
There you go. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to have the opportunity to meet with all of you. My goal today is very simple. I would like to tell you a little bit about myself, our charity, and what I have learned about caregiving and a special assignment that I have done around caregiving to veterans. So that's my goal today. I am founder of our registered Canadian charity, and we have been established since 2008. And we're different. We're an internet-based charity. So most of our work is done online through video and podcasts. One of the things that I also do is for the last 12 years or so, I have been a regular contributor to a Canadian magazine called Caregiver Solutions. So just a few fundamentals about caregiving, and I'm sure you've heard or experienced some of them, but I think it's important to note what the life of a caregiver is. No one ever wants to be a caregiver. It's not like we wake up one day and say, gosh, I can hardly wait to be a caregiver. That's what I've always waited my whole life to do. Well, no, it doesn't happen that way. It starts gradually, and it's our efforts increase as the health declines for our care recipient. And our job is so varied. You know, we only have 2 hands, but really every caregiver needs 8 hands. We should all be octopuses, and our lives would be a lot easier. Our jobs are often horrendous, 24/7. Often we do a lot of physical lifting. We help care for hygiene, feeding. We help with shopping. We are the taxi service. We go to medical appointments. We deal with the caregiver or the care recipient's frustrations, whatever they are. We deal with our own frustrations. We also have legal and financial responsibilities. Sometimes we pay bills, and sometimes we are named in the legal documents for power of attorney. And often when our loved one dies, then we have another job, and that's of the executor of the estate. So we go the whole gamut of everything that needs to be done for a care recipient. And many of us do it 24/7. We give up our jobs. We give up getting promotions. So it is a pretty tough job to be a caregiver. And I always say, when I took care of my mom and dad for 10 years, my dad had cancer, my mom had dementia. Truly, many days I was honored to do what I did. And equally so, many days I went out of my mind. And you've got to know that's the life of a caregiver. So I'd like to share some experiences on the positive and the negative side about being a caregiver. There's 4 that instantly come to mind on the positive side. And that is joy, feeling honored to help, feeling valued, and feeling appreciated. Now, on the negative side, my chart is much longer than 4 items, I must tell you. We often feel out of control, stressed, burnt out. Our number one issue is guilt. Caregivers deal with guilt every day for every reason. We have resentment. We could have anger. We are exhausted. We lose sleep. We lose income and promotion. We often spend our own money and not get compensated. We can be awfully isolated, and that's a horrible place to be as a caregiver. We lose relationships, either with friends or spouses. We have poor health. I can tell you, no caregiver I have ever met is in better physical and mental shape once they became a caregiver. It's just the opposite. We are often overwhelmed, and we often lose hope. So as my role in terms of helping this magazine and contributing, I was asked a few years ago to write a series of articles about caregiving to Canadian veterans. And I found that a very interesting topic. My dad and most of my aunts and uncles, and actually my uncle lives in Pearlie, as did my aunt until she died. So there's a great connection there. So I was very interested to look at this topic of caregiving for the magazine that I write. And what I'd like to share with you now is my thoughts on what I learned as I did that research. Well, obviously, everything that I've mentioned about caregiving is a given, but I would put it down to what I would call the 3 R's of caregiving to veterans. And I'll explain them, but they are retribution, repercussions, and resilience. So retribution is the first one. As I did my research, I was astounded at how difficult it was to find people who wanted to talk to me. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in terms of research for this magazine. Veterans and their caregivers, I found, are afraid to speak out. They are afraid to be cut off, refused help, or blacklisted. I often heard, I'd love to talk to you, but my wife won't let me because Veterans Affairs is the evil empire. Okay, that's pretty, speaking of a culture of distrust. And veterans and caregivers live in fear. So that's my first R. The second one is repercussions. And I ask,
I'm really sorry.
Over?
I let you go for another minute or so. But if you could conclude, it sounds like you've got quite a bit left in your opening statement. So
no, I've got 2 slides.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go fast. So the repercussions are what happens when the caregiver has a bad experience with Veterans Affairs. Obviously, it comes back to bite the caregiver, and they are less likely to want to caregive. They're more likely to be abusive. They'll want to run away and escape because it's all on their shoulders, and they take the brunt of the frustration that the vet feels through the dealings with caregivers, which comes to my final one, which is resilience. And when the caregiver is dealt the repercussions, their resilience is weakened. They're less likely to want to be caregivers. Their spirit is broken. They are maybe physically abused. And what they really want to do often is just run away and hide. And so I say to you that as you write policies and programs, be mindful of what I'm calling the retribution, repercussions, and really you're impacting the resilience of caregivers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bart. And thank you to all the witnesses for your opening remarks. Up first for our questions, MP Broussard for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for everyone for taking the time to be with us this afternoon on this very important study. Dr. Passy, thank you again for being here. You've been here many times, and I'm not sure that you've seen actual effects of some of your testimony come to light because not much has changed, not much does change, and I think you'll agree with me on that. One of the things that I found interesting when you were talking about caregivers and veterans, you went through that criteria, and if I didn't know any better, Dr. Passy, I would have thought you were talking about Max Gabriel. I don't know if you know Max or know of him. He's been to this committee. In fact, he was invited to this committee, but didn't get a chance this time around. But he's publicly spoke about his situation, that he's 115% disabled, has been rejected 5 times for his caregiver allowance. And you talked about 7 different things, and I was only able to write down 6 of them, but you said at the end of it that it comes back to entitlements and decisions. You also said inconsistent application, lack of flexibility, often dealing with mental health, overly restrictive. And I'm just wondering, based on your experience in dealing with veterans like Max, which I know you haven't dealt with, but in similar situations, how have you been able to overcome some of the problems that you've seen for those veterans who've applied for, in this case, many times with Max, but have been rejected by VAC?
It's difficult. Talking about resilience, getting worn down. I've been doing this a long time, and to be honest, I feel worn down by Veterans Affairs. Initially, they were very good, but now they're obstructionistic. They're restrictive. We have lay people typically overruling medical specialists and stuff. And the reality, the only thing that keeps me going is my loyalty to my fellow brothers and sisters, veterans. It's the only thing that keeps me going. I would have quit a long time ago. We had multiple, and I've got multiple examples, multiple denials. And then you get to the second level, last time it's over with. And well, I found out that if you wait about 6 months or a year, you can start the whole process all over again. But it's very wearing, not only on the caregiver and the veteran, it's also very wearing on the professionals that are advocating for the veterans for these entitlements. And it's perseverance. It's the only thing I can do. I just can't walk away.
Oftentimes when the veteran's dealing with mental or physical injuries, occupational stress injuries, mental health, they just can't take it anymore, can they? And so if you're exhausted, I can't imagine how exhausted veterans and their families are in going through this process time and time again, as is the case with Max. And finally, you do just throw your hands up. And he told us that this week in a separate message system. He said, I don't know what to do anymore, right? And so is that the kind of thing that you hear often?
Yes. So I deal almost exclusively with post-traumatic stress disorder. And about 49% of people with PTSD think about suicide, and 19% actually act on it. I've been very fortunate. I think it's partly the therapeutic relationship and the bond I have as a fellow veteran. In all my years, in June, I'll have been a doctor for 41 years. In all my years, I've never lost a patient to suicide. But the example I gave you would have been my first, and I didn't know about it. And that's telling me that not only are they wearing down, but they're now starting to not reach out, because had he reached out, I could have done something about that. It's a real dire scenario. We're not tracking the suicides when our veterans leave the military. And to be honest, every one of my veterans, when they get a letter or an email from VAC, they develop anxiety because the vast majority have had negative interactions. And there's a reason why there's bulletproof glass in the VAC offices now, and that shouldn't be there. It should be a supportive environment.
Oh, I know I've only got 1 minute left, Dr. Passy, but I do want to profoundly say thank you, because I know that you have tremendous amount of respect within the veterans community because of your advocacy for them and the work that you do to try to assist them. So, and I've started by saying, you've been here many times in front of this committee. How frustrated are you that you never see changes happening?
I can't even put it into words. I'm the tip of the iceberg, though, compared to my veterans. I mean, they're living it. I'm having to deal with it. It's different. It's so easy to correct. It just takes some political will. Right. And we need to get some of the VAC senior bureaucrats out of the way, because they seem to be the resistance.
That's a common theme that we've been hearing. We had Mr. Brouillet on last week, and he and others are saying the exact same thing. Thank you, Dr. Passy. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is MP Fillmore for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and tremendous thanks to the witnesses today for coming and sharing your wisdom and your experiences. I'd like to focus on the caregiver recognition benefit, if I could. You've each shared in your way your role, and Ms. Bart, you really painted a picture of what it means to be a caregiver. We heard earlier on this committee from many caregivers and veteran supporters, but I'm thinking in particular today of Lieutenant Colonel retired Jerry White, who's here in Halifax, a veteran of the Army and of the RCMP, who described to this committee that his wife was his support through his release, through his reintegration into civilian life, supports him through his contacts in his tireless devotion to helping veterans in this community, and support even for his appearance at this committee, which was a tremendous burden for him, a drain for him. and did it anyway. So I thank you for adding to the committee's understanding of the burden, and I want to say the joy, as well as Ms. Bart mentioned, about that comes from being a caregiver. But clearly, it's hard work. We see from the stats that the caregiver's benefit was received by a little over 1,100 people this year. And if I just take that number and it's not very scientific, but if I divide it by per capita across the country, it means about 30 people in Nova Scotia will draw that benefit. Well, there are thousands of veterans just in Halifax. So obviously it's not reaching as far as we would all like it to be. So I really want to ask for your vision, your dream for what this benefit could be, and I guess specifically what changes you might recommend. Mr. Gauthier recommended some very specific, increase it to $1,500 tax-free. But if you could help the committee to understand what we can take away from this to make that benefit reach more people, I think we'd all be very grateful. And I would open it up to each of you have this experience, and I'm sure you have things to say. So let's just get into it.
I guess go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Dr. Passy and then Mr. Hines, maybe. Yeah.
Tout simplement, je pense qu'un
Well, I think that $1,000 for the work that Mrs. Bart was talking about, it's a lot. So we could increase the budget to $1,500. You have to remember that the spouses who were with those military people all that time, they suffered at that time, and now they have the physical and moral responsibility for the veteran. It seems to me that if you calculate these things appropriately, there's really a lack there. And the way to simplify giving these out is very simple. You already have tables that have been set. So I think that the veteran, when he reaches a certain percentage, it should be automatic. So I'm at over 100%, and I don't have it. So for every step that you get to, that's the problems with VAC. When you have a certain level of the percentage of physical or mental disability, the veteran has to guess what his rights are. So as when you're at 60%, you're on a list. If you get to 100%, it becomes automatic. So that's what has to be done to accelerate the process. I lost several of my friends to suicide.
But I think Dr. Passy
Merci
and
beaucoup,
Mr. Hines had
Monsieur
something they wanted to say.
I just wanted to quickly address the whole issue of criteria. It seems like Veterans Affairs has gone towards like the disability tax credit criteria. They've made it very difficult for individuals to actually be able to be eligible for the criteria. It's interesting, in the US, they have what's called a shut-in allowance. And anyone that has difficulty being able to get out of the house and shop and do all those sorts of things, they actually have an award for that, which is somewhat similar to our caregiver allowance. I think we need to relook at the criteria and make them a little more flexible and a little more applicable to our veterans. They've served, they've suffered. The caregivers suffered while they were serving the members, as well as when they've retired and become veterans. So we have to look at the criteria for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Passy. And I think we have a minute left. Mr. Hines, if you wanted to add your piece. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I think we've got to be clear about what this benefit is about. Is it to is it a token, $1,000 token to somebody who is having to carry on with the care and the support of the veteran, or is it to really compensate them for the time and the difficulty and the loss of employment and the loss of income associated with being a full-time or near full-time caregiver to a veteran? Because if it's the latter, we are failing miserably to do that. We've got people working 20 hours a day, their day job and their caregiver responsibilities that they've taken on, or they're giving up their income, their earning ability, so that they can carry on with that moral and lifelong responsibility that they've taken on, being married to or supporting a veteran.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much. Sorry, that's time. And up next, MP Desilets for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good day to all my colleagues, and also thank you to our guests for participating in this exercise. Mr. Gauthier, my first question is for you. So it's an honor for me to speak to a member of the Vandus, and it's a great pleasure to commemorate the participation of the 22nd Regiment in the Vimy battle, one of the many battlefields where the Vandus particularly distinguished themselves. So my question is the following. We had the opportunity last week to speak to the Minister Macaulay in person a week ago on Monday, and he confirmed to us that there is an inequity in the quality and in the speed of services being given out in French at the Veterans Affairs in relation to services offered in English. So I would like to know, with your experience of a few years in the field of help and support to veterans, have you been able to observe something like this? Were you able to observe a difference? And if that is the case, according to you, does this have an impact? So we're talking about help to veterans. Their families are linked to that. So does that have a consequence if we're not getting the service that's needed? No. In terms of service, that's right. So the Ombudsman himself told me in person that there is a shortage of staff, of Francophone staff. So I've been told that for a number of years. So somebody's missing something. Does it have an effect? Yes, it goes up to suicide, and that's why I created the group. So in the 20 months that I created this, since I created this group, I saved 4 people from suicide. Often it's because of the long time it takes to get services. Yes, it does have an effect, and I can say that, yes, it took time. I can say it took me 36 months to get an answer to get an allowance for a caregiver at home. 36 months. That's crazy. And it's more than that because I didn't know the procedures before that. So it actually took 7 years to have it refused, with all the documentation that said the opposite. And even the lawyer, Mr. Bastarache, was scandalized when he learned the decision, and also how long it took. And I'm not the only one experiencing this. There are many, many people experiencing this. And so I think really French-speaking staff has to be hired. It's urgent. It's been 20 years, I think. It's the Ombudsman and the employees who told me this. The employees told me this last month. I don't know on the English side. We're a friend with people who are on the English side are telling us it's going much more quickly. And there are Francophones who speak English very well who make their requests in English because it doesn't go quickly enough in French. And the other thing I want to tell you, the case managers in the sectors have much too much power, much more than they should, especially the Quebec office and a little bit the Montreal office. So I'm telling you this because of my group's experience. They don't insist that the person has rights. They say, don't apply here, don't apply there, you won't have any rights. So I think that the duties or the instructions of these people should be seen again, and there should be a direct link of contact, especially for caregivers and people who work in the field, like Mrs. Boutet, so that these people can be helped to get help. They can't go through all administrative levels to get help. It doesn't make any sense, as was said earlier. We have to go directly to the source. So you go to all these levels and you don't have an answer 16 months after. And I have several friends who committed suicide because the service was so slow and because there was a shortage of French-speaking resources. So it's really lamentable, and that's why I used my own funds to save my friends. I wouldn't leave someone on the battlefield. I wouldn't let them die alone. So that's why I created the group. But I would like things to go much more faster in the procedures at Veterans Affairs. Thank you very much. Thank you for this, Mr. Gauthier. And if I come back to the same question for Mr. Passy, maybe not the same question, but are we able to make a connection between the slowness of services to a veteran, be it because of French or something else, and their level of distress? Would you agree with me to say that there is a correlation between the two things?
Brief response, please.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. The longer this takes, the more stress it creates for the veteran and family members. Absolutely. And the one thing I just wanted to add, not only is this a benefit for the caregivers, but you have to realize if the caregivers aren't there and the veterans end up in long-term facilities, you think about the cost that is per month and how much we're actually saving by having them stay in their own homes. But lack of resources in Veterans Affairs and unnecessary denials is creating huge stress and suicidal potential in our veterans. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And up next for 6 minutes, MP Blaney, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the folks that are here testifying. If I could speak with you first, Dr. Passy. First of all, I don't have a copy of the brief. I'm assuming that it's going through a translation, but just want to make sure that we do get that at some point. So one of the things that you talked about was how long the claims are taking to be approved. And what I've heard from multiple veterans is it's starting to feel to them like they're applying to insurance, where they're being forced to prove in great detail, repetitively, again and again, what the challenges are and what they're facing. And so it doesn't feel like a service provision where you go and say, I served the country, here I am at this side, what can we do to make my life work with all of the challenges that I have? And of course, we hear both from caregivers and veterans that they're often retelling their stories again and again, and how frustrating that is because it feels like no one on the other side knows, and how it is re-traumatizing. And especially for some folks, some of the veterans who have huge psychological issues, this can mean now a couple of weeks of the caregiver having to give higher level of support. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about that and the impact that it has, because it is a study on caregivers. What is the impact on the caregivers, and how does that impact in turn the veteran?
Good question. Let me just say there are some very good individuals with Veterans Affairs. I have to say that. I've had that experience. I've also had experiences with people that have been terrible. And a lack of quality assurance program and a lack of the ability for the veterans to be able to provide feedback means that system will never, ever change. It's a huge issue for all our veterans. Trust is a huge issue for all of our veterans. And the idea that their word is being disbelieved, or they're having to provide excessive evidence to support their position, again, creates a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, a lot of irritability. This can come out as verbal aggression, etc. About 49%, 50% of people, our veterans with PTSD, will lose their relationship as a result of their symptomatology, the stress that's there constantly. So the stress that's put on the caregiver. Imagine feeling responsible for the person you love so much, but not having the power to change anything. It's the absolute worst position to be in. Huge responsibility, no power to change it. And you know, the thing is, Veterans Affairs exists because our veterans have served the country. We're actually the employers of Veterans Affairs, but we're not seen that way. We're seen as being dependent. We're disempowered, and the delays and unnecessary denials are having a very tragic effect on family members, caregivers, and the veterans themselves. And I just, you know, we're going to lose a lot of people if it doesn't change.
Thank you, Dr. Passy. I'm going to come back to you again, and I want to thank you for acknowledging the great workers that are in VAC. And I agree with you. There's amazing workers, and you know, I think one of the biggest challenges is they're being put into a box that is like these outputs are more important than the human connection, and that does concern me. I guess my next question to you is really, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that the vast majority of caregivers are women, and women's work continues to be undervalued again and again in our system. So I think when we look at $1,000 a month for often women who have given up big chunks of their career because they believed in the service that their partner provided, we need to acknowledge that and understand how we're valuing that. But what my bigger concern on this issue is that caregivers, families, and loved ones are being asked to treat and manage PTSD with no training, no support. And you know, I think about listening to them talk about modifying all this behavior and trying to create a safe space in a world that is often very triggering. So I'm just wondering, what is the impact on the family? You talked about how many partnerships are ending because of this. What is the impact on the family, and how does the lack of knowledge affect that? And what are the tools that would be more supportive to caregivers?
Right. So you can actually develop what's called vicarious PTSD as a result of being exposed over long periods of time to individuals that have untreated PTSD and are very symptomatic. And so family members, that can be the kids, that can be the caregivers, et cetera, can actually develop their own mental health issues. There's no way around that. I know when I was still working at the BC Operational Stress Injury Clinic, we had a group program that attempted to address this. We had the spouses come in. We tried to give them some tools and stuff, but you know, it's difficult to understand and treat this disorder when you're a professional. As a layperson watching a loved one go through this, it can be quite devastating because you personalize what's occurring and you think that it's my fault that my partner is blowing up or whatever, and it typically has got nothing to do with you. It's because they've been triggered. So we need better education. We need better resources available for family members and particularly the caregivers. Caregiving at this level, you know, professionals have difficulty with it, and we're expecting amateurs, lay people to do this. And I think the caregiver allowance, if it's $4,000 a month for someone to be in a long-term care facility, and we're only paying a caregiver $1,000, I think that's crazy. They need better support financially, emotionally, professionally to do this type of support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, I believe for 5 minutes, MP Wagenthal, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here today. What you contribute to the possibilities, I will say, for veterans is huge, and it means a great deal to hear from all of you. Dr. Passy, I know you somewhat from those I hear from who have had your services, especially, as you mentioned, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. Out west, you have made a huge impact on veterans' lives. And I really appreciate the fact that you say, my veterans. That's ownership, that's passion. And I hear that so, you know, from people who serve the way you're serving. and sometimes I think you'd like to retire. Have you retired? I don't think, no. But you talked about the frustration of lay people overruling medical specialists. So I interpret that from what you talked about, your experiences with denial. The lay people overruling our VAC, and the medical experts, specialists, are people like yourself who can diagnose and say, this is what this individual needs. Is that fair?
That's absolutely correct. Not only on the caregiver allowance, but I've seen and I've been overruled in regards to a diagnosis of PTSD, the origin of the PTSD, and we've gone all the way up right through VRAB. And we had, in one case, we went to the court 2 times, and the court told VRAB to change the decision, and we had to go there twice before finally the lay decision was overruled and the professional diagnosis was accepted. This happens all the time in Veterans Affairs.
Which only increases that level of sanctuary trauma and PTSD exacerbation, I would think, correct?
Absolutely. It's devastating every time a veteran's turned down because they've walked the walk, they've lived the life, and they know what is true. And every time it's denied, it feels like they're being told that they're lying.
Right.
And yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I have so many questions. So on that note, we look at what it costs, and the dollars that we hear are constantly being, shoveled into VAC to help with all of these needs, and yet it doesn't seem it's going into a sinkhole somewhere. And when you talk about PTSD and the little bit of experience I have in listening to members who suffer, does anyone go over anywhere and serve in the military where, first of all, there's the anticipation of the potential for a scenario that would be very frightening to me, but I know you prepare for it. And then actually being there in theater and then actually experiencing a crisis. Like, I sometimes think that Canadians think you only get PTSD if you have some kind of single horrific experience, when it's the culmination, would you say, of service? You've been there in service for 22 years.
It can be both. You can have one fairly significant traumatic event, or it can be accumulation of a number of smaller events. And in my experience, the soldiers, the men and women that develop PTSD in theater, or it doesn't have to be in theater, it can be in Canada, they're able to continue doing their job. Their problem is when they come home, and particularly their problems when they have to interact with their family and friends and stuff. That's where it really shows up. I've sent people back on tours with PTSD, and they've done okay, and they've come back. The problem's when they get home.
Okay, I have 1 minute left. I can't help but think about that commercial you see on TV about getting the right tires and everything, and they call it the Midas touch, where he just touches something and it turns to gold. And you look at the stresses and the costs and the complications of this entire situation. Wouldn't it be best, like you say, to give the Midas touch here that says thank you, and not send you to VRAB 3 and 4 times, and simply deal with those conditions? What percentage of our entire armed forces are we talking about here, and why do we not do that? What is the barrier to doing the right thing here?
A brief response, please.
Sorry.
Difficult brief.
The
research I showed did in Yugoslavia, we were running 12 to 15% PTSD. Out of Afghanistan, it's been running about 5 to 7 initially. It can go higher than that. The benefit of the doubt used to be given to the veteran. It is no longer being given to the veteran. And like I say, lay people, they've got these little diagrams, and if you don't fit in this box, then you're denied, and that's a problem. This could be dealt with very easily with adequate resources and better training of the of those resources. Have a little empathy. Seriously, as a civilian, you'll never understand what it's like to serve in the military, but have a little empathy. and realize these people are struggling. Thank you.
Thank you. MP Casey for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all of our witnesses. I'm not sure whether you are aware, but there was a federal budget handed down yesterday that included some substantial new investments that should benefit veterans and their families. I'm going to ask for some specific questions in connection with those investments just to get your reaction and perhaps your advice on them. But just to recap, there was, and this comes to a point that has been discussed by our panel today, there's $140 million dedicated to cover mental health treatment costs for veterans with PTSD, depression, anxiety, while they sit in the backlog. So while they're waiting for their claims to be approved, there's a $140 million envelope to treat them. There was a $15 million additional injection into the Veterans Wellbeing Fund to support the veterans through the COVID-19 recovery, including homelessness, employment, retraining, and health challenges. There was $236 million dedicated between Veterans Affairs and Department of National Defense to expand work to eliminate gender-based violence and sexual violence. Where I want to start, I'd like to bring our female witnesses into this discussion. I want to start with you, Ms. Boutet, because of your background in housing and wraparound services. In addition to what I just mentioned, there was $45 million for a pilot project to reduce veterans' homelessness through rent supplements and wraparound services for homeless vets, like counseling, addictions, and finding a job. So my question to you, given that you work in this area, is first, what advice would you have for the government in putting this pilot together? And secondly, what is the impact on the veteran's family when there are wraparound services and housing supports?
So that's an excellent question. Thank you. Maybe to start with the last part of your question around supports for families when a veteran is struggling with homelessness. One of the real challenges is veterans who are in that position often are cut off from their families. And often do not have that close relationship. And so that becomes very difficult. When we start to think about the type of advice for government about dealing with veteran homelessness, so many of these issues as well are tied to mental health, PTSD, substance abuse. And I think we really need to approach it with that lens. And to work with established organizations and agencies who are on the ground already doing work in that area. So certainly experts in mental health and substance abuse, almost first and foremost. There's also very good evidence to show that by providing stable housing for individuals, first and foremost, that's then a good place of stability and foundation for dealing with other mental health challenges and other supports that might be helpful. But first, people need a roof over their heads. And I think several of the witnesses this afternoon have spoken to the importance of working with people who understand their reality, who are with them, and are certainly share their lived experience. And that can't be underestimated in this situation.
Thank you. Ms. Bart, welcome back. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the Veterans Wellbeing Fund from your perspective as a caretaker, a caregiver, and as an authority and an author in that domain. So with the COVID recovery, undoubtedly there has been additional pressures on caregivers. The Veterans Wellbeing Fund is there specifically to address those challenges. There's a $15 million injection into the fund in the budget. What advice would you have for the government with respect to that envelope of funds that was committed yesterday?
Just a brief answer, please.
Oh, hang on. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. My comment to the budget would be, it's not enough, make it more. It's not gonna solve all the problems. And yes, it will help. And if the system was easier, I love this expression. People don't care how much you want to know how much they care. And so make the system stronger, put more money into it, find the money. These people are worth it. If I were a caregiver now to a veteran receiving the $1,000 a month, and I was truly doing 24/7 care, I would be insulted. Is
Thank
that
you.
all I'm worth?
Thank you. MP Desilets for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like my question to two witnesses, Mr. Gauthier first, and then Mr. Passy secondly. What I understand currently as the definition of caregiver does not take into account the quantity of help given to the person, but rather the seriousness of the situation of the veteran. That's what I perceive. Correct me if I'm mistaken. That means that even if a veteran has a severe case of post-traumatic stress syndrome, for example, but that the veteran can still wash himself, dress himself, or nourish himself, these caregivers will not be recognized as such. So that's my understanding. Could you please corroborate if that's your understanding? If that's the case, I find that definition hugely restrictive, and obviously I don't agree. I have the impression that this minimizes in some way the seriousness of the mental health problems that veterans can have. So in your opinion, Mr. Gauthier first, how should we modify this definition of caregiver so that it could be more inclusive for caregivers and their families? Well, I believe that these criteria seem to be based on veterans from the Korean War or from World War II. We have a new generation of veterans where the biggest problems they have is PTSD, and it's not mentioned enough there, and that's not taken into account much for decisions. I think we should look at studies and include that, because PTSD is as incapacitating as an amputated leg or something else. It's not taken into consideration enough. So the person who makes a request, a claim, and is refused by the case manager just loses it. And some of them will commit suicide because of that, because it just doesn't make sense. That person is no longer autonomous, doesn't have any autonomy, can't leave their house, is afraid. One of my friends committed suicide, was abandoned by his family. So if he'd had some psychological support when his family left, he would probably not have taken this action. So we really have to take into consideration this new generation of veterans and PTSD. Thank you. Mr. Passy?
It's well past time. It's 2.5 minutes go by faster. I apologize. Up next, again for 2.5 minutes, MP Blaney, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Passy, I'm going to come back to you for one more question, then I have another one to follow. So if I interrupt, I'm apologizing in advance. I really appreciate what you said about vicarious PTSD. And one of the things that really struck me was that you said we are not tracking all the suicides. And I immediately thought of the caregivers and the pressure it must be on those families to literally feel like their job is to keep that veteran alive. And I can't even imagine that day in and day out. So I'm just wondering if you have any testimony that would help us understand what a caregiver experiences when they're literally trying to keep that person alive.
Well, professionally, that's exactly what I'm been trying to do over these last many decades. It's difficult because sometimes you will lose your sense of hope. Again, I come back to this idea of huge responsibility, but not having the power to implement the changes. And it is absolutely horrible to have to deal with a scenario where you've got your veteran semi-stable, and then Veterans Affairs comes in with a denial or whatever, and then everything blows up again. And this is part of that pressure on the caregiver is part of what also causes relationships to end. These people are not superheroes. They are providing services that are equivalent to a superhero, but they don't have that resilience. And sometimes, the circumstances just blow through their resilience. So it's hard. All I can say is it's hard, whether a professional like myself or a caregiver. It's difficult to have to deal with this day in and day out and never knowing from minute to minute if there's going to be, this huge blow up of whatever.
So I have like 10 seconds, but I'm just, Ms. Boutet, you talked about the technology barrier and how hard that is for so many veterans and their caregivers. I'm just wondering if you could speak to what that is. Is it just for aging veterans and their caregivers, or is it for a broader realm?
She hasn't given you any time left to do that, but I will give you an opportunity for a very brief answer, please.
So I would say that really this is an acute issue for older veterans and their spouses, but it would not be foreign to younger veterans as well, particularly the group that we're talking about. If you have difficulty, sitting in front of a screen for any length of time, if that's triggering for you, good luck.
Thank you. Up next for 5 minutes, MP Doherty, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to say thank you to our witnesses, our guests here today, and where to start? The freedom that we enjoy isn't free, and it comes at a very real cost, and a cost to our veterans and their families. And Mr. Passy, Mr. Gauthier, Mr. Hines, Ms. Bart, and Ms. Boutet, I feel the weight of the responsibility of being a legislator, of somebody that has dealt with veterans and first responders that are struggling with mental injury, PTSD, OSI, whatever we want to call it. In the passage of my bill C-211 in June of 2018, I had thought that we were on the road for hope, that we were going to actually make a difference and develop a national framework to provide the help for our first responders and our veterans and those who serve and their families from coast to coast. And I have sat with those that have given up, sadly. And I've dealt with that, and our office has dealt with that. So I feel the weight that you feel every day. I also take offense to some of my colleagues that sit and listen to whether it's Mr. Brulier's testimony or yours today and say, yeah, but let's talk about the things that are going right and dismiss it. The budget was released on Monday, and the government acknowledged that veterans, sadly, could wait up to 2 years to receive mental health care while waiting for their disability benefit application to be confirmed. This is unacceptable. The budget also did not include a plan to address the backlog of Veterans Affairs, nor did it include a plan to support caregivers and their families of veterans. I find this all unacceptable, and I apologize profusely to those that are on here today. And I think better is needed. Mr. Passy, I'm wondering if you could comment further. I'll stop right there. I'll get off my soapbox, but I want you to know that we hear you. I hear you, and we're doing everything we can, and I care, and we'll continue to fight for you guys. Mr. Passy, I'll just allow you guys the rest of the time to talk.
I could spend all day talking. The one thing I want to point out, as I said in my opening statement, we used to in the late 90s up through probably about 2010, PTSD claims, literally, we had results within 6 weeks. So please tell me, have the government and VAC, please tell me why now, when you could do it back then, why now is it taken 18 months or longer to process claims? Why was it so easy to get claims accepted back then? Why now do we have lay people often overruling professionals? Why? I don't understand this. My veterans don't understand this. We know it was better. What have you all done that it's made it so much worse? I don't get it. It kills me. It kills me when I have to listen to a veteran crying on the phone because he's been disbelieved. What do I do with that? I mean, that's where we're at. We've done better. VAC's done better, and they're not anymore. And I want it changed. Make it the way it was, please.
I agree. Mr. Gauthier, Mr. Hines?
Oui, monsieur.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Hines.
Okay, I'm gonna say just 3 quick points on that question. We've got one of the things in the budget is mental health treatment while awaiting care. That to me is an admission of failure. If we cannot get people to care and get them access to mental health care in a timely fashion, what more processes are we going to put in place to get somebody access through this system? I mean, we've already got wait times that are unacceptable. Now we're talking about putting more money into something and having to develop another process to get it. So as far as I'm concerned, money for mental health care, absolutely. Money for interim mental health care means you've failed somewhere else. Wait times is our biggest failure.
Thank you. Up next, we have MP Sampson for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for all of you. Those who have served, thank you for your service. Those who are working directly or supporting veterans and their families, thank you. The information you are providing today is extremely important for our committee and our government to move forward on many of these issues. Mr. Hines, I really appreciated your comments on the family access support and directing us to do more review around the Australian approach. I think there's lots of good things happening there that we could benefit from. Monsieur Gautreau, j'apprécie beaucoup également ta présentation.
Oui, madame.
Puis je sais que mon collègue Désilette a posé quelques questions autour de ce sujet.
I know that my colleague, Mr. Désilets, wanted to ask some questions. I appreciate your presence.
Make me speak in both languages at the same time, Mr. Mayor, I hope. Anyway, Monsieur Gauthier.
So, Mr. Gauthier, listen, as Mr. Désilets said earlier, and Veterans Affairs confirmed several times in the past that the number of employees that are supporting Francophones was much lower than it should have been. But just to share with you, last time that we spoke with the employees, it was indicated that the last 350 hires to help the files go ahead, up to 33% of these new employees were Francophones or bilingual people. So we can see some progress. This is in the last 6 months, so it should become more and more obvious. And the fact that you emphasized, which I appreciated, is that there are employees who can speak French, but who are processing English files. So we have to really improve things.
Good, very precise information about the role of a caregiver and the responsibility and the challenges around the caregiver. Very, very important information. And I, my questions is I'd like to maybe speak about awareness. I think awareness is extremely important. The mental health, Mr. Dr. Pesce, you made reference, but I want to go back to that benefit. I know that Mr. Hines, his comments may not have been maybe different than yours on this point, but the investments in the new budget to support people with mental health while you're waiting for your claim to be processed, so that the objective here is to try to help them day one. How do you think this will help the many people that you work with that taking so much time, as you indicated in your testimony, for them to get the results and then not getting the results they need? But I just like to have your comments around this funding, because government doesn't dream about how we're going to do this. It's based on the testimonies that we've been getting that people are waiting too long and they're not getting the treatment they need. So how do you see this supporting your clients, Mr. Dr. Pesce?
Well, I think it's important because there is certainly a significant wait list to even be engaged with a mental health professional to provide appropriate treatment, assessment treatment, and support. So that part is important. I tell you though, I'd like to see a good chunk of that money, rather than going to mental health while they're waiting for their claim. How about if you redistribute that so that the claims are processed quicker? Because that is partly treatment for their mental health issues. The stress of waiting and the sense that they may be denied, that's easily treated if you can speed up the process.
Thank you, Dr. Pesce, for that information. And I'd like to share with the committee and the witnesses today that we had staff here last week talking about the wait time and the backlog, and they indicated that we moved the backlog in the last 9 months from 23,000 to 15,000. So that's quite now, realizing there's probably less applications due to COVID and whatnot, but we're seeing very big progress on that front because of the 350 new hires, as well as continuing on with the 148 that we had prior to that. Mr. May, am I going to get shut down on a question? Or?
I'm afraid so, yes. Thank you. Thank you, sir. That's your time. MP Davidson, please, up next for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Mary, Glenn, Greg, Richard, Mary, thanks so much for being here today. I would just say to my colleagues, and I think I've heard this today, just the fact that you're shoveling a whole bunch of money at something, if the system isn't working and we're going backwards, doesn't mean it's going to fix the problem. And I think that's what I've heard today. I listen on other calls. I keep hearing about the call centers, the red tape. Nothing is seamless. Those are all very concerning things for me. I guess, Glenn, I would ask you, I have a Silver Cross mom that works for me. She lost her son in 2010, and right before I came on committee today, she brought me this. This is her son Brian. and we were picking out T-shirts for a ball tournament that we're so hopeful that's going to happen to raise money for veterans this summer. But you know, she had a breakdown when we discussed this, and you know, she said, Scott, I need help sometimes, and there is no help for families, you know, for children. It's her son that made the ultimate sacrifice for Canada, and they've been left behind. So I'm just wondering, you know, the gaps that exist there for the families of Canadian Forces members that have been killed in action, Glenn. Could you comment on that?
Yes. Those, and choose my words carefully here, those individuals, whether they're parents, spouses, or kids who've lost a loved one due to their military service, and that's whether it's directly due to their military service, or whether it's due to a condition that developed that they pass, or if it's due to suicide, those people are probably some of the most affected individuals, and they're probably the most ignored individuals when it comes to looking after them. They don't have, if a veteran passes and has not given their spouse access to all of their VAC file, for example, or if a parent passes and they haven't given their child access to their VAC account, it can be a huge task just to even figure out what benefits they might be entitled to. And that's strictly on the benefit side. The whole business about getting care, I believe that most of the veterans community is very, very dependent on veteran organizations that exist as opposed to VAC. When it comes to things like this, I know Mr. Gauthier could speak to that from his work with the Vandus, but there are so many groups that have been set up to basically fill the gap between what the partner, spouse, child, parent is experiencing and their dealings with VAC.
No, I appreciate that, Glenn. You know, it breaks my heart for so many people that are being missed, and you know, the government will pat itself on the back saying, you know, we've decreased it from 21,000 to 15,000. The bottom line is there's still 15,000 people being left behind with the backlog. That is a real number, and those are real lives. I'm not sure else who brought this up. What are the barriers to implementing the Australian system of supporting family members of veterans here in Canada?
Because the Australian model was something that I raised, I would say that the only barrier to doing that would be the willingness to do it. You've got to have the will to do it. If you want to do that, I believe it is within the power of the government, within the power of the department to do that.
No, thanks, Glenn. And as Mary alluded to, and well, both Marys, you know, this committee has the power to make change. And that's what Canadians expect us to do. You know, I gotta say, as a new member of parliament, get so frustrated when I think things just don't change. We have the same reports, the same conversations, and then we even have witnesses on here. You know, we're going backwards. You know, that's not what Canadians want to see. That's not what our veterans deserve. And I thank you so much for your testimony here today. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And MP Fillmore for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Chair, for that. I'd like to talk about. I'm focused a little bit on participation rates of various programs. Look, I don't want to really do this, but Mr. Doherty raised a point here, and of course this is heartbreaking work that we're all engaged with, and we can never do enough, and we want to go faster. But even as Dr. Passy pointed out, these problems that we face today, stemmed from cuts before the 2015 election. This is not what I want to be talking about here, but those cuts were compounded by a 90% increase in uptake of veterans programs, and that uptake was because we're offering better and more programs. So we are earnestly doing our best here to rebuild what was broken by a previous government and to keep up with the demand created by the work that we've done to provide more services. And you're helping us to do that. So I'm sorry that I had to go there for a moment, but I'd like to return now to participation in some of these programs. So for example, on the VAC Assistance Service telephone line, we understand that participation rates from family members is very low. And I think that's held out as one of the programs that we are trying to help caregivers and family members, even children, as I understand it, kids of veterans and veteran households. If any witness has any experience with that telephone line, the assistance service telephone line, would you have any feedback for us on why the numbers are low, why uptake is low, and what we might do better with that phone line? I'll just leave that wide open for anybody who's had that experience. Mr. Gauthier.
Oui.
Yes. On that topic, this is one of the big problems. It's explanation of the rights and how to have a speedy accessibility. Really, there should be a document created with all the rights as soon that the military person signs up with Veterans Canada. So the Australian program, well, I looked at that. The program that was put in place in Canada is very, very good, but the problem is always the same thing. It's always the various steps. There are too many people you have to go through to get the proper person who can make the decision. So having a 1-800 number and a document that explains the process step by step would really support the caregivers and the families. The program that Canada has put in place is exceptional. Everything we have in terms of allowances is good. It's all these various steps you have to go through to get past go. There are too many people involved in that sequence. You have to have a booklet with all the rights of the person and have also a number for caregivers. So it's important for psychologists and people. Give me 6 months and I'll put a program together for you. It's very easy.
Complex processes is always a laudable goal, and of course these processes grow with add-ons over years and they become more and more complicated. So thank you for that. Chair, if there's another moment, or how are we? I just wanted to ask if there was any feedback from any of the witnesses on the Veteran and Family Wellbeing Fund.
Before we get an answer to that question, I'm going to pause your time, Andy. I do need to step in as promised at the beginning of the meeting. We do need to seek unanimous consent to continue the meeting as the bells for the vote have started. Are there any objections to continuing? Seeing none, that's great. There's 2 minutes left in your time, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the Wellbeing Fund, it provides subsidies for projects that support veterans and their families. And if any of the witnesses have any direct testimony or experience with the fund and its efficacy or how it might be improved, we'd be grateful to hear that. Mr. Hines.
Yes, thanks for the question. I have had some experience with the Veteran and Family Wellbeing Fund since it was created, having collaborated with some of the organizations who have actually made applications, some of which have been successful and therefore getting funding, and some of which have been unsuccessful in getting them, but have committed to resubmitting in future years and when there may be more funds available. I have not heard or experienced any negative feedback from any of the beneficiaries of these programs. So they can be very small, localized programs, and they can be bigger national programs. So things like Vets Canada, who look after transition and home, address some of the homelessness issues. Things like Project Trauma Support and the Mood Disorder Society of Canada, who provide in residence programs for sufferers of PTSD, who have also got a research component, because the research to reinforce some of these ideas and to build on them is important. So I think personally, and from what my experience has been, this is a veteran well-being, a veteran family well-being fund is an excellent investment in many times grassroots level activities that benefit the greater veteran community and benefit families and caregivers.
Right.
Thank you for that. I'm glad you mentioned Vets Canada. Both Mr. Stamson and I have joined Vets Canada for their Boots on the Ground program here in Halifax, and they're doing wonderful work, and thank you for acknowledging them.
Thank you. Up next, we have MP Desilets for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been listening to the discussion, and it's very interesting. For me, it's not the employees at all who were the problem at Veterans Affairs. I have no criticism of them. I'm a former administrator, and all throughout my career, my job was to decide and to be held accountable for what I was deciding, for what I was choosing to do. What I observe now is that the results are not there with the Veterans Affairs Department. And I don't think it's a question of money. The money seems to be relatively adequate. The staff also seems to be relatively sufficient. There's a specific problem in the French language department. I'll continue to insist on that. That's clear, given what was said earlier. The problem for me is the political will. It's the road that must be followed. There's maybe a structural problem somewhere. And Mr. Passy, I'd like to know, with the experience you have there, what do we need to do to change the situation? Do we have to start everything up from scratch again? What would it be for you?
Well, when's the last time the Veterans Affairs ever underwent a full-on audit as far as effectiveness, et cetera? Again, back in 2000, General Dallaire, myself, and other members of the committee had recommended a quality assurance program so that all these programs, the people that are implementing them are reviewed and recommendations are made for improvement. So, I mean, part of the problem is, to be quite frank, is Veterans Affairs ministers come and go fairly frequently. The issue in regards to changing the monolith of Veterans Affairs is in actually the bureaucrats. They truly hold the power, although, this committee and the minister can suggest things. The implementation is done by the administrators. And unless there's clear will, they can outweight people. And the next thing you know, you have another minister in place. And I think that's a disservice to veterans. We need some level of continuity so that there is political will that is enduring over a period of time to implement changes. But a quality assurance program would go a long way to looking at all these issues.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
MP Blaney for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to point out that the Parliamentary Budget Officer did indicate that the best way to deal with some of these significant challenges in the backlog is to hire more people. And what we keep hearing from veterans and the caregivers repeatedly is that when they call, they're not getting the same person to talk to every single time, that one person that they trust. So when we talk about the services that are provided, if there isn't that one person that you trust that you call and say, I need help with this, you don't get to access those services. So I just want to put that on the record. one of the other things that we've heard from caregivers repeatedly, and I'm going to come to you, Mr. Hines, this time, is they would like their own VAC account. They would like to be able to go on, fill out information, and get the support that they need for themselves and the family around them. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Absolutely. I don't even need a long answer. I don't need to give you a long answer. Caregivers and family members. So you can, I guess I would just differentiate very slightly. You can have a family member who isn't the caregiver or isn't in receipt of caregiver recognition. I believe that family members, whether they're caregivers or not, should be eligible for access to VAC services in their own right. And in the comments that I had prepared that I didn't have time to cover, that's part of the Australian model. Caregiver or family members to have access.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to go back to Dr. Passy for my last question. You talked about quality assurance and the fact that veterans and the caregivers are not able to give that meaningful feedback. So when we have members of the government asking what we could do better or what is working now, what I'm hearing from you very clearly is if there was a clear process where there could be that quality assurance and a review of the services, that would be a good system. So what would be the first step that we need to take to see that happen?
A very brief answer, please.
Very, very quickly. So all hospitals have to go through an accreditation program where they basically undergo a quality assurance evaluation. Veterans Affairs is in charge with funding and even providing medical treatment, assessment, et cetera, yet there's no quality assurance program there. Back in that original committee I was on, we had a professor. That's what she did. And the idea would be to hire somebody that is an expert in this and then implement a system on where the department is reviewed on a regular basis, just like a hospital has to be reviewed on a regular basis in order to maintain its accreditation. That would be a good first step because it would give veterans and family members and caregivers an ability to provide useful feedback and hopefully be able to implement change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is MP Broussard. We have enough time for about a 2.5 minute question, sir.
Not sure if it's going to be a question as it's more going to be a statement, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank all the witnesses for coming today and sharing very succinctly some of the challenges that we're facing. I learned long ago, Mr. Chair, that a person is either accountable or they justify, and the same could be said for governments. In all the interactions that I've had as in my first run as critic for Veterans Affairs, now Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs, I've taken responsibility, despite the fact that I wasn't in government at the time, for what I call a generation of lies to veterans and their families by successive governments. And I've actually, in the past, I just did it last week, in fact, when we had the witnesses before us, Mr. Bruyere and others, talking about those generations of lies. And so, by my calculation, April 19th just passed. That means that the current Liberal government has been in power for 5.5 years. And yet we hear Mr. Fillmore applying blame to the previous government, not accepting any responsibility for what's gone on over the last 5.5 years, Mr. Chair. We've had a majority Liberal government for 4 years. We've had a minority government for the last year and a half. Billions and billions of dollars have gone into Veterans Affairs Canada, and yet witness after witness, Mr. Passy included today and others, have come before this committee and said that the situation in Veterans Affairs is worse today than it was 5.5 years ago. So you'll have to excuse me if, I take what this blame game, I wouldn't even say it's personal, but for the sake of veterans and their family, the only thing they care about is that the process is fixed. And Mr. Passy, Dr. Passy hit on this, that there hasn't been that continuity. We've been through 4 Veterans Affairs ministers over the last 5.5 years. And it's been extremely difficult to fix that process, the political will not being there, as he talked about. So, you know, rather than, let's get into some accountability here, rather than some justification. That's exactly why I'm in this role, is to make sure, and I know all of you are as well, to make sure that we work to make the process better. Throwing money at a problem and not fixing it is not helping veterans and their families. And as we've heard today, we heard last week, and we hear throughout the course of our studies, the problem is getting worse. So let's work together to fix it and be accountable to Canadians and be accountable to veterans and their families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I apologize to our witnesses for that, but it needed to be said.
Thank you, Mr. Broussard. That does bring us to the end, and we do need to move because we've got to get out to vote. I want to thank you, all the witnesses who have appeared before us today. Our next meeting is scheduled Monday, April 26th, during which we will be considering the draft report on the financial health of veterans organizations. And on Wednesday, April the 28th, we'll be starting our study on commemorations. Thank you very much, everyone, and the meeting is adjourned.